Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Fanatic, and today we're taking a look at Tales of the Arabian Nights, a storytelling game with role-playing elements by Z-Man Games. Originally released in 1985 by West End Games, what I have here in my hands is the 2009 remake by Z-Man. This not only brought back and reimagined the original concept, but also more than doubled the number of stories in the already massive Book of Tales. I've mentioned both the original novel and a film adaptation based off of it when discussing games in the past. But now it's time that I take a look at a game directly inspired by this literary classic. In Tales of the Arabian Nights, 2 to 6 players will take on the roles of one of the heroes of Scheherazade's stories, or Scheherazade herself, traveling around the world in search of adventures. You might end up becoming wealthy or destitute. You might fight off bandits or monsters. You may end up marrying royalty or finding yourself at odds with an angered vizier. Players seek to craft their own stories and destinies, and eventually return back to the starting point of Baghdad to claim victory. To set up, each player will choose one of 6 characters: Aladdin, Ali Baba, Ma'aruf, Scheherazade, Sinbad, or Zumurrud. They'll each take a player board and place the character's gender token on the appropriate side. I know how weird that sounds, just bear with me, I'll explain it later. Each player will take 3 different skill tokens, placing them talent side up, denoting they're trained in these areas. These can represent anything from skill in combat, to navigating at sea, to courtly etiquette, to simply having good looks, with 18 different skills to choose from in total. You'll place your character's wealth marker on the poor space and your destiny and story trackers on their respective zeros. Next, you'll shuffle the encounter, treasure, and quest cards, and each player will take 1 card from the quest deck. Each quest has different rules for setup, some of which involve using your origin or quest tokens, and sometimes ask other players to set goals for you around the world. Each player will also take a number of tokens to represent their victory formula. They take a number of tokens representing the number of story and destiny points required for them to win in any combination that adds up to 20. You'll want to make sure the status cards are organized and easily reachable, as well as place the time of day markers by the encounter deck so that the morning marker is on top. With that, you're ready to begin. The general structure of your turn is quite simple. During your turn, the player to your left will have the Book of Tales, while the player on your right will have the reaction matrix. These will be used to determine what happens to you as you interact with the world around you. After that, you may move your character freely up to a number of spaces depending on their wealth. For example, players all start out as poor. This means they have 3 land movement and 2 sea movement per turn. You may use both types, but the total may never exceed the higher number. So you could travel 2 spaces by land and 1 by sea, but you could not travel 2 by land and 2 by sea. As you go up or down in wealth, your movement allotment will change. After you move, or choose not to, you'll resolve an encounter in your current location. To do this, you'll draw a random card from the encounter deck. There are 3 different types of cards that can come up. Here we have Rome, a prince, and the Crystal Palace, each of which is resolved a little differently. If you draw a city card, you'll call out the number on the bottom center, in this case 65. The player with the Book of Tales will turn to that section, which in the case of the lower numbers are all tables of random encounters. The active player will roll a die, and if the space they're currently on has a number, add it to the results. Results greater than 12 are simply counted as 12. In this case, Scheherazade has rolled a 1 and has no modifier. So the storyteller looks at result 1 and informs Scheherazade that she has encountered a crafty ne'er-do-well, instructing them to look at reaction table D. Looking at their player board, she chooses one of the actions. In this case, she can choose to punish, aid, rob, question, attack, buy, or hire the ne'er-do-well. Being inquisitive and clever, Scheherazade decides it's best to question him. Scheherazade then rolls the destiny die, which has sides with plus, minus, and blanks. The player with the reaction matrix will look to chart D and look up the row for crafty and the column for question. They'll then either add or subtract 1 if the destiny die lands on a plus or minus respectively. In this case, the result is a plus, so they'll instruct the storyteller to turn to section 524, which is a rather brief one. Please keep in mind that I have intentionally chosen a short passage in order to spoil as little as possible. The ne'er-do-well demands alms before he will tell you anything. The results allow Scheherazade to use wisdom if she has the skill. Luckily, she has it, which allows her to determine that the man's information probably isn't worth her time nor her money. At the end of the result, it shows D1, which represents that her destiny score will increase by 1 point. Depending on the results of an adventure, many things can happen. A player can gain or lose wealth. Their destiny and story scores may change. They might learn new skills, find legendary treasures, or acquire new statuses, not all of which are beneficial. As you progress along the destiny and story tracks, you'll gain a few rewards. Being able to learn a new skill, acquiring a level of wealth, or gaining a permanent +1 or +2 to all your encounter chart rolls. After a player resolves an encounter with a city card, they'll hold on to it. On a future turn, if they visit the city in question, they may discard the card to roll 1 die, unmodified, and resolve the effect mentioned on the card. The second type of card has a character listed in 3 times of day. The storyteller will consult a chart, and once again, the active player will roll to determine the encounter's demeanor. In this case, Alibaba has a total of 5, which the storyteller informs him means that he has met a disguised prince, and he'll choose a reaction from list A, resolving things in the same way as Scheherazade's encounter. Finally, we have some cards that represent special events or locations, if you're in the right place to encounter them. You'll notice there's 6 symbols on the card, representing mountain, desert, sea, forest, city, and island spaces. You'll look at the space you're currently on and look at the matching symbol on the card. If it's a number, you'll have a random encounter according to the die roll as the others. However, if you see the letter N, you have a special encounter with the event or place listed on the card itself, skipping over the die roll and choosing how to react from matrix N. As the game goes on, you're likely to gain extra skills. If you gain a skill that you already have at talent level, you'll flip it over to place it on its master side. When you have mastery in a skill, then before rolling the destiny die, you can ask the storyteller to look at all 3 possible paragraphs and see if any of the results involve skills you have mastery in. If they do, you may opt to skip the roll and go straight to that paragraph. One must be wary though, not every use of a skill is necessarily beneficial. Along the way, you may encounter majestic treasures, items of great value, or mystic power. These can include a sword that turns you invisible, a magical trumpet to warn you of danger, a mechanical horse which never tires, or of course, a seemingly ordinary oil lamp that contains a powerful gene. Each of these has their own unique effects which are described on the card. Alternatively, most of them can be sold to increase your wealth. Each item has a value listed in the top left corner of the card, and at the bottom center is maximum wealth level which it can place you at when you sell it. Finally, there's status cards. These can represent many different effects, both positive and negative. Over the course of a game, you may become wounded or diseased, you may be honored or blessed, you may be turned into a hideous beast, or cursed to become the opposite sex. Yes, that is why there is a marker for such. You may even marry or become sultan if your journey leads you down such a path. There's a total of 28 different statuses, each of which has their own unique effects and often include conditions for how to rid yourself of them. Play will continue like this until a player reaches their hidden story and destiny goal and then returns to Baghdad. After one final encounter, they'll declare the endgame and all other players have one final turn to try and do the same, with tiebreaker rules included if any other player manages to do such. Component-wise, the game is pretty solid. Cards are of decent thickness and have a clear plastic coating to protect them. Artwork is used sparingly, but what's there is great. Tokens and dice are solid enough, although nothing out of the ordinary. And of course, you have the massive 300-page ring-bound book of tales which gives plenty of variety to the game. It's not textbook size, but it comes pretty close. Good luck to anybody who has to ship this thing. Characters use standees. While I'm not fond of standee clips, it does at least come with enough for every character. Thus, you won't be sliding them on and off and damaging them in the process. Before I head to the conclusion, there are a couple of house rules that I would like to touch on. I normally don't discuss house rules because I score and review games based on the rules as written, not on modifications by the players. However, I do think it's important to mention that there are 2 small changes that the community has suggested that can greatly enhance your enjoyment of this game. Firstly is the time of day. In the official rules, you're supposed to only change the time of day when you run out of encounter cards and reshuffle the deck, starting with morning, progressing to midday, and finally ending with night. However, I've played with up to 4 players before. Never once did I have to do this, and many others have said the same online. I prefer to instead switch the time of day each round. So each time the first player goes again, you'll advance time, with it switching back to morning on the 4th round. Secondly is the grief-stricken status, which is notorious for how it effectively halts the game for the player in question. I tend to tell players to ignore the 8 story points requirement and simply lose it as soon as they gain 1, as if they already had 8. In conclusion, Tales of the Arabian Nights is a very unique game. In ways, it almost feels less like a game and more like a one-shot role-playing campaign. You'll explore blistering deserts, bustling cities, and the high seas, all while having numerous adventures within them. While some of the design choices are a little odd, there's so much to explore, and you're unlikely to ever see everything that the game has to offer. It does very much grade against my usual taste in games. It's a very luck-heavy title where you have very little control over what happens to you. But it's not meant as a brain-burning strategy game. It's all about the story. I find myself coming back to it time and time again, hoping to find new treasures or even explore one of those fabled places of power. While it is an unusual fit for me, it's still a very enjoyable experience that I find to be worthy of a respectable 8.6 out of 10. If you're interested in purchasing Tales of the Arabian Nights, your best bet at this point is to check secondhand sources, such as the Board Game Geek Marketplace or eBay. If you want to know more, links are included in the description. But what about you? What do you think of Tales of the Arabian Nights? What games go against your usual taste that you enjoy? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below. And please remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.